There we go. It's happening.
All right.
All right, folks, this is Patrick and Carson Ratliff. You probably know who Patrick is, but this other person is Carson. This is my brother. I don't know, Carson, 2 sentences.
Hey, everybody. I'm Carson. I'm Patrick's younger brother. I am also an English teacher. I teach at West Michigan Aviation Academy over in Grand Rapids. I'm happy to be here, talk about some Harry Potter.
Yeah, we're gonna give an example of how you might go about your next assignment, which, if you haven't realized it already, is to have a conversation with at least one of your classmates. Okay, you can do it with multiple classmates, but you need to find a way to have this conversation and record it. We are using Zoom, which you can ask me about, and I'll try and help you with it if you want to use it. But I think Teams calls, something we'll go over in class, will be the easiest way to do this. So we're going to talk about the archetypes. And I am going to share my screen, I think. And you're going to bear with me here. Google Chrome, isn't this what I want? I don't want nap time, though. Sorry, kids. The kids enjoyed nap time. All right, here we go. Okay. So we're going to talk about Jungian archetypes. And the first thing to say is Carson and I are going to talk about the 12 archetypes on the wheel that you are familiar with. Right? Oh, it's not going to let me. Okay, kids, it's not going to let me screen share without restarting the app. And we're not going to do that because we already started. Or maybe we should do that. Can we do that?
Yeah, wait. Yeah.
It'll take like 1 minute extra.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So what I'm going to do is I got to give the computer permission. Sorry. I got to give the computer permission. And then, oh wait, does that work? Can you see that?
Yeah, that's it. You got it.
Oh, so I didn't have to restart everything.
No, we're good. I see the wheel.
Okay. Are we still recording or did I stop it?
We are still recording.
Yes, kids. Problem solving in action. Okay, I hope everyone enjoyed that. All right, so we're recording here. You can see the screen. You can see Carson. Hang on, I can make you see me. Boom. Okay, we're doing a little light dark motif here. Also, this is a little play on the old joke about those dark Mountain Dew videos that were poorly lit, so parents didn't like them. But here we are. We're looking at the wheel. You guys saw this. This was shared with you. And here's some of our wonderful cast of characters, right, from Harry Potter. And we picked Harry Potter. I gave Carson the choice of Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Star Wars, and we kind of narrowed it down and decided that Harry Potter would be maybe the most unexplored in this case, but also maybe the one with the most chance of connecting with you guys in terms of what you're familiar with and what you've read. So we're basically going to go around this wheel, and we are going to discuss which character. We each came prepared to pitch a character, more or less, for each of these. And we're going to discuss which character from Harry Potter we think best embraces this sort of archetypal energy. And I want to frame my understanding of the archetypes, which you are all going to have to do in your video. And I want to say that I understand Jungian archetypes as occurring on multiple levels. And the best way I understand an archetype is as a pre-formulated schema or sort of rubric for knowledge or understanding that Jung argued existed in sort of a collective subconscious. And now I'm kind of verging on maybe Freudian terminology. But essentially, there's an idea within all human minds, there are certain archetypes for understanding. And some of those archetypes take the form of sort of character types. And these are the 12 we're looking at today. Jung talked about other aspects like the psyche, the anima, the shadow being one that I can describe pretty simply in being kind of the inverse qualities of your day-to-day extroverted self. So the shadow is all of those qualities that you are muting or suppressing in your day-to-day life. And you get some interesting ideas of this in everything from The Legend of Zelda to Peter Pan. But on a sort of character trait, sort of story level, we have these 12 archetypes. So Carson, well, maybe we can start by asking, so you're going to pick where we start, but yeah. I'm curious to know which one of these you like locked in first or felt most confident about.
So it wasn't necessarily the first one, but when I stumbled across Jester, it seemed like a no-brainer.
Okay.
That would be my $1 million answer.
Okay. What'd you
So,
go with for Jester?
well, I broke the rules immediately and didn't choose one character. I chose two. Fred and
Right.
George Weasley.
Yeah, the twins. Okay, so it's interesting. So when we're looking at Jester here, we're thinking about, and I like to look at the outsides and then consider this middle motivation second. So this idea, okay, the label of Jester, and the idea of wanting to connect to others. Certainly they use their humor, right, their jokes as a form of connection, right? They aren't, what's interesting for me with them, Carson, is I started with them as an honorable mention for Outlaw, because I was thinking of particularly when they left the school. But then I had the thought that, well, wait a minute. No, that's actually what that book is showing, is that they're not outlaws. They are just normal people. And it's going to be interesting when I share with you my everyman, okay, that we have the twins right here, because they are in this sort of normal, sort of everyday realm of the world for me. But things get flipped when Dolores Umbridge takes control. So I completely agree. I put in here Luna Lovegood as embracing some of this energy in like the final books. I don't think this is her strongest, where she most belongs, but there were some elements of kind of like her playful desire to connect. But I eventually kind of threw this away because I decided this isn't her core motivation. I think her core motivation is actually a spiritual journey, not necessarily to connect to others. But there's some argument to be made that this might be her anima, or that's another Jungian archetype, or her inverse side.
Yeah, I think her connections oftentimes are almost unintentional, or in like she's unintentional comedy, right?
Yeah.
People laugh at her frequently, and the group grows to laugh with her, and she makes friends with Ron and Harry and Hermione through her awkwardness. But I don't think it's a drive of hers, that connection.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's a good take. I'll agree. I think another honorable mention here is Gilderoy Lockhart. And at first that seems superficial, just because like he makes us laugh. But I think if you took his character seriously as like the point of view character of a dramatic story, this would be his ultimate desire to connect. Yeah. And if he would embrace this role instead of trying to be a phony magician, right? Like he might succeed. Okay. Which way do you want to go from? Well,
let's go to a belonging everyman. It sounds like
okay, good. Yeah, I like this. I like where we're going to end up then too. So everyman here. This for me is very easy. This is Ron.
Yep. Same.
Well, I won't spoil what I'm going to say when we get to where I placed Harry, but I think it makes complete sense when we get to Harry. So what were you thinking here? And I actually put more generally, this is the Weasley family. The Weasley family represents what J.K. Rowling sees as the good everyman wizard of the role. Everyone is, they're not trying to be capitalists. They're kind of doing what feels natural to them. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I just thought when I think about this archetype, I think about someone whose main desire is to fit in, main desire is to be accepted among peers, and actually went to kind of the flip side of that, of anxieties of not belonging, anxieties of not being accepted and not fitting in. And when I think about Ron, especially when I think 2 points in the series, him and Harry have major conflict, and you kind of see, I think, Ron's anxieties surface of in the Goblet of Fire when he thinks that Harry's betrayed him and put his name in there. You see kind of those weaknesses of Ron coming up, and I think that it shows that core drive of really, I want to belong, I want to be a part of this.
I love that. I'm going to add on top of that and say that Ron's angst, and angst is often mistranslated as anger, but it's fear, anxiety, in sort of an emotional sense is the original German meaning. And Ron's angst is that he sees everyone moving away from this everyman part of the circle, is that he feels the need to try and pass himself off as these other things. Jester at one point, lover for a huge section of a book. He does get to play the role of the hero, but I'm thinking, of the classic chess scene, for instance. It's funny. He is like not trying to leave a mark, though. He's like using his mastery, right, in a certain area, but it's still about connecting to others, right, in that context. So
yeah,
he has to come to terms. Ron's big thing is coming to terms with like, this is an okay and good thing to be. I don't have to be ashamed of my family being sort of ordinary, right? I don't have to be embarrassed of my dad, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Okay.
I think he's perfect.
Caregiver, who you got?
Mrs. Weasley.
Oh, interesting. Okay. You give me your take, your quick take.
Well, I just think it's in the name, and I think of her, I think a service, especially when we experience these books and these films from very much like a Harry perspective, and that's how, at least as a viewer, as a reader, that's how I approach the text. I relate to Harry. I see things through his eyes, and I think more than anyone else in this universe, Mrs. Weasley is that mothering figure. She is that selfless, looking out for you before I look out for me, person in Harry's life, perhaps more so than anyone else. But I'm curious to hear your take.
Okay, so I like that, and now I would support that because my initial sort of point of attack against you was going to be like, but is her goal to give structure to him, or is it to be emotional? And I think there is something there are times in the story where she acknowledges the role their family and the Burrow plays on his life, and there's also an unstated, when you say like a mother figure, there's an unstated recognition, almost always unstated, that she knows he needs that. And it's a little bit unfair to her kids. I love her character because she's like doing what she knows Harry needs, and her family takes a hit, like huge hits, because of it.
Oh, yeah.
So I see Hagrid a little bit here too, but I'm going to because I got to give props to her somewhere. I'm going with Maggie Smith McGonagall here. And service to the school. And we see this arc culminate when she gets to take over as headmaster. Yeah. And she, like, because my first thought was Hagrid, and then I'm like, provide structure. Yeah, right. And Hagrid obviously wants to connect to others. That's clearly where he belongs anyway. But McGonagall as like that, like rock, like I'm going to discipline you. And it's one of the few, because Dumbledore doesn't discipline him enough. It's one of the few places where he receives discipline that we as the reader are supposed to see as appropriate and fitting. Dumbledore is just always cheating to help Gryffindor. So, and this is another interesting place I think we can point out. I think the segment that we just left, to some degree, is like the farthest removed from Harry for me, but also kind of his support system in a way. And this quadrant that we're in right now of these top three, this to me is very much Hogwarts, and the sort of wizarding structure is very much up in here for me. So for rulers, we talked about this earlier. This is the one we spoiled. I have Umbridge here.
Umbridge, yeah, without a doubt.
And I mentioned earlier that, you know, Fudge is like a satirical, like, you know, parody sort of take on this. You absolutely get this energy represented by the Dursleys in the first book. And then also by Voldemort as he manifests in the first book. And I think there's some of this in Mr. Tom Riddle, we'll talk about a little bit more coming up, I imagine, because he was a little bit of an enigma for me. Do you think what deep down what Umbridge really wants is that structure? Do you think that's what's essential for her?
I think so. She's an interesting one at her core, because most of her actions, it's tough for me to interpret them as coming from an inner desire that she has for structure or control, or if she is like more a puppet of this corrupt ministry. Right? So is she acting to just, you know, squash any sort of student creativity and freedom because of ministry fear? Or if she was left to her own devices, would she be this very controlling, need structure, children should not misbehave? Like, is that at her core, or is she kind of just manifesting in that way because of the ministry's demands?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, and my initial reaction is to lend towards what I'm going to coin this right now, the Saruman distinction. Because one thing that distinguishes her is that she doesn't make that grab to rival Voldemort. She isn't a megalomaniac that tries to break out of her system. I think she does very much represent the system's need and maximum desire for control. And I think what makes her so interesting to me is that she becomes complicit with evil unintentionally, I think, in some ways. Now, some ways, like, she's just cruel. But, like, the way in which the Ministry of Magic helps accelerate bad things through trying to control stuff, I think, is a really important thesis there. And I think the most interesting way to read her character is that she is desperate for this structure because some deep part inside of her knows that she has no control, right? So she's got to squeeze everywhere.
Yeah,
so,
well put.
All right, who do you got for artist?
Would this be also sometimes known as creator?
Yes.
Okay, I have Tom Riddle.
I also have Tom Riddle. Okay, so what's your take?
Well, that's fun. I think this is someone who, wants to realize a vision, wants to create something out of nothing, and providing structure to the structureless, doing new things. I think this was maybe forced a little bit because I was really trying to find a home for Voldemort, Tom Riddle on here. But he's trying to create something of lasting value in his eyes. Yeah.
So we're going to jump into this. I'm going to jump across here and point out magician and mention a little bit hero because I really struggled here, and now I want to take it back and I want to say Dumbledore. Because the trouble I had here is that it is unquestionable that Tom Riddle wants to leave a mark. Whether he knows that or not, there isn't actually that third layer of nuance to his character where we really feel like there was a good boy at Hogwarts there at any point, right? And this may be subconscious, but I'll make the counter argument now that what makes Harry Potter interesting is that Tom Riddle is the epitome of the magician, is that he wants to use power to make, he's about power and making a mark. It isn't he just wants to be the greatest, and controlling people happens to be the way that you show you're the greatest would be my argument. It was really hard to place Dumbledore because so much of Dumbledore is Dumbledore vis-a-vis Harry. And it's hard to get a sense for me of Dumbledore in a larger context. But Dumbledore as an innovator is absolute for me. A Dumbledore is constantly sort of innovating in, the use of the pensieve, very progressive approach to Harry's education.
Yeah.
Anyway, Innocent. This was the first one I did, by the way.
Oh yeah. This is maybe the last one I put in.
All right. What do you have?
I have Neville Longbottom.
Oh, I like it. I accept it. I felt like this was maybe my closest to a cop-out. I have Lily Potter here. Or Lily and James a little bit.
Okay.
And the idea that although Neville absolutely works because he is on a spiritual journey, absolutely, but this idea of safety of not just for himself, but he wants to protect others. He wants to heal others, right?
Yeah, I really focused on that word innocence and just kind of really unpacked that. If someone no wrong in their mind, always wants to do the right thing. I think about the classic moment in the first movie when he stands up to Harry, Ron, Hermione when they're sneaking out, right? It's just that is innocence and safety, epitomized.
I love it. I also now I'm thinking of even his innocence is even sort of manipulated, in Goblet of Fire, for instance. So I like this a lot. And this is why he becomes such maybe an emotionally compelling character. One of the reasons is that his innocence was lost when his parents were tortured, right? He's never had this. He's fighting to protect something that he basically has to come to terms with the fact that he lost it, before the story began, which gives him an awful lot of depth. What do you got for Sage?
It's Hermione.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Hands down, right?
She is, and she's in this discussion of archetypes. I mean, she is such a good reference point for this archetype. I think a lot of these we're trying to make fit, but I felt the same way about Umbridge and Ruler. I mean, some of these characters are a beautiful template for.
Well, and I want to make the meta argument that maybe our central wedges in each of these 4 quadrants are some of our strongest takes, because it's impossible to argue with the gesture. I mean, you could put other gestures forward, but I feel like that gesture take's pretty solid too. I like the focus on knowledge here and the idea that this really highlights and makes me appreciate and remember Hermione. This is what she represents is, especially by being a dirty mudblood, as she, a nomad. No, Madge. No,
Yes. Yeah.
right, is that she represents that there's stuff that bridges between both the magical and non-magical world that is important and essential for survival. And if it weren't for her, like, Harry would be dead because Gryffindor is kind of full of idiots. All right. Explorer is Harry Potter for me, hands down.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, what do you have here?
Well, spoilers. I didn't realize until I finished that I don't have Harry on the map, which is kind of
Yes.
So that was like my initial hot take I messaged you about earlier. I have Sirius Black.
That's who I had first, and I came back and shifted him one over and put Harry here.
Okay, see, yeah, well, I'll tell you about more.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, I just like Harry wants, and freedom is so interesting here. Ultimately he wants to be free of being the chosen one. He does not want to be Jesus, is basically his arc. And the big key for me here was identifying that the Weasleys represent the opposite side of the wheel. And this is the Ginny choice right here, is this choice to like, I want a normal life with a normal family. Otherwise you marry Hermione, right? It's like, I mean, or you don't marry or whatever you do, I don't know. But like, it's interesting that the Hermione, they have a couple moments, but like when he chooses Ginny, it's like, okay, no, I want in with this family. I almost feel a little bad for Ginny because I feel like part of it is just like, well, I just want to be a Weasley. But he's on a spiritual journey. He's not about knowledge, right? Yeah. And he's absolutely not about safety. So like when I picked that this was his spot, it's like pretty obvious here. You could make an argument that what he really wants to do is connect with others, but and maybe there's an argument to be made that like this is Ron and this is Harry, and Harry actually is an everyman and that's the thing, but I don't think so. I think he's the explorer. All right, I had Sirius for outlaw. Sirius wants to, wait for it, leave a mark on Harry in terms of his education. I also think there's this big idea of liberation from Sirius, from his history, from his family, from Azkaban, from like, and this is what turning into a dog or a wolf. This is, I mean, for he and Lupin, who both, I think Lupin is an unwanted outlaw. Sirius is an outlaw by choice. Like Lupin is an outlaw by force. Sirius is an outlaw by choice. Is basically and that's why I love that third story, because that's a dichotomy that's so important. And I think because this is all through the lens of Harry, what he does want to do is leave a mark on Harry. He's not really trying to provide structure. Harry's connecting to him, but Sirius has a point, I think. So who do you have?
I had Sirius and then crossed him out, and I have Bellatrix Lestrange.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was definitely swayed just by that word outlaw and the, connotative associations I have there. But someone who wants to leave their mark, wants to, rebel against the norm, wants to fight against others. I don't know. It just really seemed to fit with outlaw.
Interesting. I like, I see her as some outlaw energy. I see her as some lover energy too. And this desire to like Voldemort needs to accept her.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I definitely see that. That's
but okay. But it's interesting to you could do like kind of a flip side of a coin with like the Death Eaters versus the Order of the Phoenix in terms of like their foils, right? So like, what does who's the werewolf, the big scary
Greyback?
Yeah. So like he's definitely in the leave a mark quadrant, right, for the bad guys. Whereas I would argue that I don't know, who of the good guys really want to leave a mark?
Sirius. I mean,
yeah. So I don't know. Interesting to think of them as flipped. Okay. Magician. So this is the one where I had Dumbledore and Voldemort kind of back and forth, and I think ultimately I can't argue with Voldemort / Tom Riddle somehow here. I think Voldemort, because I think
you swayed me on that one. I had Dumbledore, but I like your take a little better there. I think
Dumbledore doesn't want to leave a mark. I don't think that's why it's so interesting.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's a sage who has to become these other things for Harry or something. I mean, he embraces a little bit of the explorer too. Like,
I think this is getting into a little bit more backstory. But I think about Dumbledore's childhood and like young adulthood. I think you mentioned earlier Dumbledore's tough because we see him so much through Harry's eyes, as this old wise sage. But I think if you think about his upcoming, I mean, I felt like all he wanted as a kid was to leave a mark. He wanted to make a name for himself. He was in cahoots with Grindelwald or whoever, and was trying to, he was trying to become a powerful magician.
So maybe like so, if Ron's the everyman who's trying to like move away from this falsely, maybe Dumbledore is like has spent his life trying to work against, so now we'll call this the Gandalf corollary or whatever, right? The don't tempt me with the ring, Frodo, because if you give me that ring, this is absolutely what I become, right? I get locked in right here.
Great.
Instead of being able to kind of move through, I like when Gandalf's being a jester, for instance, right, in Hobbiton. So, okay. Hero.
I think we have the same thing.
Draco Malfoy?
Draco Malfoy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it was so obvious as soon as I'm like cycling through the characters, I'm like, I don't have a hero. And I'm like, oh, that's it. Like he wants to leave a mark. He is clearly compensating, right, for like inferiority complexes and all that throughout everything. What are your other thoughts?
Well, I think, it's someone who seeks the spotlight, who seeks having their mark on something. I want to use different language there, but he just seeks influence. He wants to be remembered, wants people to know his name. He relishes that hero title. He's someone that Harry wants to be that everyman, doesn't want to be that hero. I mean, if you put Draco Malfoy in Harry's shoes, I mean, he's getting like a sweatshirt with Chosen One like stitched on the front of it. He would love it. Draco would eat that up. So that's
yeah. There's an interesting like twisting of his character, because on the one hand, he like, it could be a tragic story. Like, for instance, if he wanted to be a good guy, if his rivalry with Harry was that like he was supposed to be that Gryffindor, cock of the walk kind of deal. And then he gets sullen and they develop a rivalry in the middle of the books. And then he ends up killing Dumbledore, right? Or Snape or whatever. Like he's involved in that whole thing later. Sorry, spoiler alerts for Harry Potter's kind of. He gets involved in that later on. Then you have a real tragic flaw. It's like, well, you wanted to be a hero.
Yeah.
Here's what being a hero actually means. You're going to have to kill the head of your school, be complicit in that plot.
Yeah.
But it's twisted because he thinks he wants to be a bad guy. And then he kind of realizes, wait, no, I don't really want to be a bad guy. And so there's an interesting way in which that doesn't kind of work perfectly, which makes him fun to consider. I think it's kind of fascinating that he is set up so immediately. It's such a kid's book thing to do, to make him immediately obviously like the bully kid, and to not back off of that, to not like have them become best friends in the second book or the third book or something.
Yeah, strong choice.
All right, any other honorable mentions? Any people that you didn't get to place here that you wish?
We haven't done Lover yet.
Oh, right.
Because we started at Jester.
Okay, so, I mean, I thought the hero was more surprising. The Lover's a little bit of a hot take for me, too.
Okay.
I have Snape here.
Oh, okay, yeah. I definitely see that.
He wants to connect, and he's sort of hidden. So the idea that Snape is like the concealed lover, and then the take in my head was that this is how you get that love story to work in a kid's book, is that this underlying romantic passion is this revealed, repressed thing that still adds this gothic kind of big picture idea to the story as a whole.
Your students that have only read the first 5 books are very confused.
Yeah, but I also put that Moaning Myrtle represents some of this energy in the book that she's in. Cho Chang is like a false, like she's like a mirage of this for Harry. I don't know. What were your thoughts?
I had Hagrid.
Oh.
Yeah. I think he constantly, I don't know if you hear that thunder, constantly seeking intimacy and connection with others.
Yes.
That's his core drive in my mind. Yeah.
You know what? I got a little blinded by, sorry, eating Twizzlers, specific conceptions of love here, because I pointed out in class, and now I've had it stuck in my head, that if you line this up on the hero's journey wheel, this comes right about where you're going to get meeting with the gifts from the goddess and woman as temptation.
Oh, so you're quite,
so I was kind of locked into thinking very sexistly, sort of very patriarchally about like lover as sort of intimacy in a sexual sense. But no, Hagrid, all he wants to do is be close to the kids. He doesn't even really want to teach them. You know, it's like,
not at all. That's just extra. Yeah, I think that for the discussion of archetypes, I think that your initial approach there is really logical, and that's how, outside of this context, I normally think about these archetypes. But I think when we do this deep dive into one text and I get more analytical into thinking, I broaden that mindset a little bit, and I don't necessarily subscribe to the cliches or the stereotypes there.
Yeah, so I mean, as we're wrapping up here, one thing that I think is important to emphasize is that there's obviously an idea of sort of spectrum theory that, or a sort of omnispectrum theory that like all things are on continuums and measured on continuums. And I think when you're thinking about archetypes, you got to make a continuum where on the one end you have consolidations, and we would call these caricatures usually, right? Consolidations and embodiments of these exact archetypes in one singular character. And then on the other end of the cognitive spectrum, thinking about this, you have these archetypes as energies that exist within a story. So, you're going to have some stories where like the jesters, and quite often, because I would argue that the R2-D2 and C-3PO are probably the jesters of A New Hope. Timon and Pumbaa are absolutely the jester character right here, especially with Pleasure, right? So you're going to get some overlap, and you'll get some movies where like some of these things are deliberately missing, or some of these things are deliberately represented by non-human sources. Mm-hmm. And you'll get some that just really focus in on sort of one part of the pie. And then you'll get worlds where like, because there clearly are parts of Harry's journey where he is embracing all of these different energies. Yeah. Right. He has to be all these things in order to succeed. And that would be the general idea of sort of unpacking Jungian archetypes in yourself. A big difference between sort of intellectual consideration and then therapeutic consideration of sort of Jung or Freud is how you actualize your life based on this. So just like with the hero's journey, where I would argue that like, if you can start to apply the lens of the hero's journey to your life as it is happening, you can maybe open up possibilities or options for yourself, or see yourself as succumbing to different energies as part of a cycle. I would say the same thing here. You could probably take a look at your life in certain contexts and say, no, this is a case where I have to be the caregiver energy because that's not in this room. Or, hey, I'm being a little bit outlaw here. What rulers or caregivers or everyman am I combating against that's making me sort of take on that energy? Other final thoughts you have?
I love that. I think you put that really well.
All right. Well, Carson, why don't you, for the kids who actually watch this all, you got any good book recommendations or
let's see,
shows or films?
I am in the middle of reading For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. Big Hemingway fan, and this one's a monster, about 500 pages, and I thought, what better time than the present to crack this one open. Let's see, we're doing my wife and I are doing a Marvel rewatch. We just watched Thor, all three Thors in a row. I've never really rewatched all these Marvel movies now that the whole kind of canon exists. So it's kind of interesting and fun to go back and relive these a little bit.
I went through about 2/3 of them like a year ago because I was like, all right, I got to catch up on this cinematic universe. I'd like to watch Ant-Man. That's one that I haven't seen that I want to watch.
We just watched that one as well for the first time. Really, really good. Really fun.
Okay, good. Yeah. Wait, I had one that I was going to throw out there, but now I've when you said For Whom the Bell Tolls. Oh, no, I was just going to share. So I'll close with this insight. I was driving back from getting food earlier, And I was noticing there were a lot of people outside today, very warm here in the afternoon, but there was social distance between them on these sidewalks. So it was like, as I drove across this crosswalk, there was like 3 sets of adults with kids, but they were very clearly like coordinating their movements. It looked like a video game where you're trying to sneak past guards in a castle. You know what I mean? And they're like perfect. Like that's how they're moving on the sidewalk. And the thought I had in my head was like, oh, this is weird. It's just like a zombie movie. And then I'm like, well, of course it's just like a zombie movie because that's exactly the fear that zombie movies are preying. I'd like never really thought through zombie movie as a trope, but this idea that like, oh, we all have this desire for social connection. What if that was the one thing that was a threat to us? There you have it. So,
well
all right. Well, thanks, Carson, for checking in. We'll have to bring you in sometime later in this unit.
Love it. That was fun.
All right. Can you stop the recording now, and then we can say goodbye?
I think you have to.
Oh, I probably do. Hang on. There's stop share. All right.